Hello and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. My name is Greg Deckler, and today we're going to be continuing on with taking back the narrative from the Calculate crowd with regards to the no calculate approach to DAX. And by taking back the narrative, what I mean by that is that, for lack of a better term, no calculate was never meant to devolve into some kind of pissing contest between calculate and no calculate, right? That was never the purpose behind it. That's what it sort of devolved into with the calculate folks. But the real purpose of no calculate was, hey, here's an easier way to learn DAX that doesn't force you down the calculate path, doesn't force you down necessarily down the star schema route, doesn't, don't run afoul of a bunch of these nuances and complexities of using calculate and hidden filters and all this other nonsense that goes on, right? Here's a simple pattern that you can learn, and you can pretty much apply it to almost every problem in DAX. So just learn one way of doing it and apply it. And by the way, it doesn't have to use calculate. But so now one of the things that so easier in my opinion, but one of the things that Brian Julius always pointed out about the no calculate approach, and I'm not sure I ever made this argument myself, but something that Brian Julius would always point out is that you needed to learn less functions with the no calculate approach than you did with the calculate approach. And it just seems reasonably correct to me. It always did, but I never really actually put it to the test. So I decided to put it to the test. And what I decided to use, at least as an initial starting point, I had created a series where I took like every quick measure in Power BI Desktop, where it seems like it's almost like they went out of their way to shoehorn using calculate into those quick measure expressions, especially with like weighted average and a couple other ones, where it just is crazy. So I had these already created, so I figured, well, why not take a look at the calculate approach, the code generated by Power BI Desktop, and the no calculate approach, my equivalent measures for those, and just let's count up the number of functions used in that. So I've got I have all of these published out to the quick measure gallery, right? So better total for category. The nice thing about when I publish these, I'm like, okay, here's what the quick measure returns, and here's an equivalent no calculate approach, right? So I did that for better total for category, year-over-year change, year-to-date total. Now for this one, Power BI Desktop uses total year-to-date, so it doesn't actually even use calculate in this one. So what I did for this one is I decided to use Alexis Olson's fastest calculate version of total year-to-date. So I'll use that for, that's the only one that really deviates from this. Better filtered value, better average per category, better running total, and better rolling average, and finally better weighted average per category. So it's only 8 measures, right? So it's a pretty small sample size, but it is the 8 measures that Microsoft deemed important enough to include into Power BI Desktop. So it seemed like a reasonable sample size. What I might do in a future video is, I know that Ante Rask is, I hope I pronounced that right. He's been working through DAX, the definitive guide to DAX in like chapter 5 and creating no calculate versions. I think I just helped him solve number 38. And then now he's moving on to, I think, the time intelligence stuff as well. So in a later video, I might expand the sample size to include more measures. But I started out with these 8, right? And so what I did was pretty simply, if I can get this out on the screen, I just created an enter data query, and I took and said, okay, here's average per category, calculate. It uses keep filters, uses average X, uses calculate, uses sum, uses values. The no calculate approach uses summarize, uses average X. Right, I just entered these all into a table. Yeah, so easy enough, right? So, and here's the results that came back. So create this simple report. So if you take a look at calculate, the count of functions is 50. Now, I did not, like, if some appeared 3 times in a calculation, I didn't count it 3 times. It's just in there once. So this number may be a little bit off, but in terms of no calculate is 36, calculate is 50. Number of functions included in all 8 of those measures, right? So there's you're already reducing by almost a third the number of functions that are in the actual formulas themselves. But that's not really the important number. The important number, in my opinion, is this distinct count. of functions. So this is a distinct count of functions. So in calculate approach, those 8 measures, you have 24 distinct different functions that are included, versus the no calculate approach is 13. So you're talking about almost a 50% reduction in the number of DAX functions that you need to know to solve each of those 8 measures, right? I mean, to me, that's pretty significant. And somebody's telling me that, here's a brand new language, you've never touched it before. Here's an approach where you need to learn, all of these functions. And here's a second approach where you need to learn half as many functions. Call me lazy, but I'm going for the half as many functions, right? I mean, get me up to speed and be able to solve as many problems as possible, as quickly as possible, right? I guess that's just who I am. But I think that should appeal to a lot of people, right? Here's a brand new, programming language, Python, and you can either go this approach and, you have to learn, 100 different function calls or whatever it is in Python. And over here, you just need to learn 50 of those. Go with the 50, man, all day, every day. So now if you want to know in terms of like, I also did a little bit additional analysis here. So here are the functions that both approaches use. They both use all selected filter, max sum, sum x, average x, summarize, all divide. Right now, if you look at, here are the functions that the no calculate approach uses versus are not used in the calculate approach. And that's EO month, date, year, month, which are pretty simple functions. I mean, let's be honest, right? Versus in the calculate approach, versus these are the functions that are used in calculate that are not used in the no calculate approach. So you obviously have calculates in there. You also have calculate table. You also have some, end of month, dates between, start of month, window, order by, partition by. Those are not necessarily the easiest functions in the entire world to understand what's going on with them. Also keep filters. So that's it, really it. I really think, again, that this proves out, and I think even for a larger sample size, I think this still would prove out, because basically you can throw out every time intelligence DAX function for no calculate. You're never going to use them. In fact, I highly recommend you don't ever use them. So those are going to be gone, plus all the specialized calculate functions like, keep filters and remove filters and all the other stuff, that have been specifically geared as helper functions for for calculate, which why the most the most powerful function in all of DAX needs all of these, half a dozen helper functions to help it out. I don't know why. It's supposed to be the most powerful. But anyway, so this is why, again, I think this is a pretty compelling argument as to why the no calculate approach to DAX is easier to learn than the calculate approach, because you just simply have to learn less DAX to do it. So that's all I had for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.